All right, so we're diving into this Engadget article today.
Yeah.
And it's about an iPad deal.
Yeah.
A 9th gen iPad for just $200.
Wow.
That's a pretty crazy low price.
Well,
Almost 40% off.
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, and what's really fascinating is that Engadget still rates this model as fantastic, even though it was released back in 2021.
Yeah, that's what caught my eye, too. Like a fantastic iPad at that price.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's tempting.
Yeah.
But, it makes you wonder,
Right.
Can this older model still hold its own in 2024?
Yeah.
What do you think?
You're right to be cautious.
Yeah.
I think it's important to consider the context of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
This model is actually being discontinued.
Oh.
So this sale is likely their last push to clear out inventory.
Oh.
The classic clearance sale.
Yeah. But even if it's not the latest and greatest,
Right.
sometimes older tech can be a real gem.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially at a bargain price.
Yeah, and while the 9th gen iPad may not be a powerhouse, compared to the newer models, it still excels in certain areas.
Okay.
Particularly media consumption. Think Netflix.
Yeah.
YouTube ebooks. It handles those tasks with ease.
I've actually found that tablets are perfect for casual entertainment.
Right.
It's so much more relaxing than hunching over a phone. And, you don't always want to dominate the TV.
Exactly.
Oh.
That's one of the sweet spots for this iPad. It's a great portable entertainment device.
Yeah. Now, the article did mention that this deal is specifically for the 64 GB model.
Right.
That might be a limiting factor for some people.
It's definitely something to consider, especially if you plan on downloading a lot of movies or apps.
Right.
You want to think about your storage needs and whether 64 GB is enough for your usage.
Okay, so speaking of specs, the article mentions something called the A13 Bionic chip. It sounds impressive, but they also called it ancient.
Right.
So where does it actually fall on the spectrum?
Well, the A13 chip is a few years old now, but ancient might be a bit of an exaggeration.
Okay.
It's still capable of handling everyday tasks and media consumption without any hiccups.
So it's like a reliable vintage car. It might not win any races, but it'll get you where you need to go.
That's a great analogy. It's not about raw power, but rather efficiency and reliability for its intended use.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's get real for a moment. What are the potential drawbacks of going for an older model like this?
That's a fair question. You won't be getting the latest and greatest features found in the newer iPads, and software updates might be phased out sooner rather than later.
So it comes down to your priorities, right? Do you need cutting-edge tech, or are you primarily interested in a reliable device for specific tasks? And how important are those software updates to you? These are all things to think about.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right fit for your needs and expectations. It's not just about the deal, but whether the deal aligns with how you plan to use the device.
This is where things get really interesting. Because it's not just about this specific iPad, it's about how we approach tech purchases in general.
You've hit the nail on the head. This deal sparks a broader conversation about value technological evolution and making informed choices in a world of constant updates and new releases.
Okay, before we jump into that bigger picture, let's quickly recap what we've learned about this particular iPad deal. What are the key takeaways here?
First and foremost, the price, $200 for a 9th gen iPad, is an incredible deal.
Yeah.
Even though it's an older model, it's still a solid device, especially for media consumption.
And it's important to remember, this deal likely won't last forever. If you're interested, you might want to act fast before they're all gone.
Absolutely. This is a limited time offer, and it's a great example of how you can snag a fantastic deal if you know what to look for and you're comfortable with a slightly older model.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about what this deal tells us about the bigger picture of technology and consumerism. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, it's almost like this deal is a case study in how quickly tech can become outdated.
Right.
In the eyes of the market. A few years ago, this was the iPad to have.
Yeah.
And now it's being cleared out.
Yeah.
For a fraction of the price.
It's crazy how that shift in perception affects our buying decisions.
Right.
We're constantly bombarded with messages about the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
But this deal reminds us that sometimes older tech can still be incredibly relevant.
Absolutely.
It's a good reality check, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for someone like me who, gets caught up in the excitement of new releases.
Yeah.
Do I really need the newest iPad, or would this older model actually satisfy my needs just fine?
That's the key question. And something we should be asking ourselves more often with tech purchases.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking we always need the newest, shiniest gadget.
Right.
But this deal encourages a different perspective.
And the article even mentioned the 64 GB storage could be a limiting factor. It makes you think about what we actually need from our devices versus what we're told we should want.
Absolutely. This deal highlights the importance of evaluating our individual needs and priorities.
Okay.
What do we primarily use a tablet for? How much storage do we actually require? These are questions worth considering before clicking buy on any device, new or old.
It's like a mini lesson in mindful consumption.
Right.
Instead of getting swept up in the marketing hype, we're forced to pause and assess our true needs.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about saving money. It's about making intentional choices that align with our values and usage patterns. Do we value having the latest features, even if they come at a premium cost? Or are we content with a device that performs well for our specific needs, even if it's a generation or two behind?
It's interesting to think about how this applies to other tech purchases as well.
Right.
Phones, laptops, even smart home gadgets. The cycle of new releases is relentless.
It is, and that's why this conversation about the iPad deal is so relevant. It's a microcosm of the larger tech landscape, where innovation moves at breakneck speed, and the pressure to keep up can be immense.
So how do we navigate this landscape
Right.
without feeling like we're constantly playing catch-up or falling behind? Are there any strategies you use to make informed decisions?
I think it starts with recognizing that technology is constantly evolving, and there will always be something newer on the horizon. Accepting that fact can help alleviate the pressure to always have the latest and greatest.
That's a great point. It's about shifting our mindset, right? Instead of chasing the next upgrade, we can focus on finding devices that meet our needs and will last for a reasonable amount of time.
Exactly. And that might mean considering a slightly older model like this iPad if it still offers the functionality we're looking for at a price point that makes sense.
It's about finding that sweet spot between value, functionality, and longevity.
Right. And recognizing that value is subjective and dependent on our individual circumstances and priorities. There's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to tech purchases.
This deal certainly has sparked some interesting thoughts about how we approach technology in our lives. It's not just about the specs and features, it's about understanding our own needs, evaluating the options available, and making choices that align with our values.
And sometimes those choices might lead us to a surprisingly good deal on a slightly older piece of technology that still has plenty to offer.
Now, speaking of good deals, I couldn't help but notice the Engadget article mentioned other early Black Friday sales popping up. It seems like retailers are eager to get a jump start on the holiday shopping season.
They certainly are. And those early deals can be tempting, especially as we head into the holiday season when spending tends to increase.
This raises another interesting question. How do we balance the allure of a good deal with the potential for impulse purchases, particularly during a time of year when we're bombarded with marketing messages?
That's a great point and ties back into our conversation about mindful consumption.
Yeah, it seems like the key is to stay focused on our needs and resist the temptation to buy something just because it's on sale, especially if it's not something we were planning to purchase in the first place.
Absolutely. It's about being intentional with our spending and making sure our purchases align with our overall budget and financial goals.
This deep dive into the iPad deal has taken us on quite a journey, hasn't it? We've explored the specs of an older model, considered its relevance in today's market, and discussed the broader implications for how we approach technology and consumerism.
It's been a fascinating exploration, and I think it highlights the importance of staying informed, asking critical questions, and making conscious choices that align with our individual needs and values.
So as we wrap up this discussion, what are some key takeaways our listeners can apply to their own tech purchasing decisions, whether it's an iPad or any other gadget that catches their eye?
Yeah, I think a big takeaway is that value isn't always about having the newest thing. This iPad deal shows us that older tech can still be incredibly useful if it fits our needs.
Exactly. Sometimes those older models become hidden gems, especially when you factor in the price difference compared to the latest releases.
Yeah, it's like we talked about earlier. Thinking about what you'll actually use the device for is key. No point in paying for bells and whistles you'll never touch.
And this applies beyond just iPads, phones, laptops, TVs. All of these tech categories have rapid release cycles. Taking a moment to assess your needs before jumping on the newest model can save you money and frustration.
Right. The article mentions storage being a potential limitation on this iPad model.
Right.
That's like another good point for our listeners to consider. How much do you really need?
Yeah.
Versus what the marketing tells you? That's such a crucial question. We're often encouraged to buy devices with more storage than we'll ever use. This deal forces us to be realistic about our storage needs, which can be a valuable exercise in itself.
This whole conversation has been a great reminder to be more mindful about tech purchases in general. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype, but taking a step back and really evaluating what we need can make a huge difference.
And beyond the individual level, this deal highlights a broader trend in the tech industry. How quickly things evolve. A device considered cutting edge just a few years ago is now being phased out.
Yeah, that pace of innovation is both exciting and a little daunting, right? It makes you wonder, how can we make smart tech decisions without feeling like we're constantly playing catch up?
One strategy I find helpful is focusing on the longevity of a purchase. Instead of chasing the latest upgrade every year, consider buying a device you can use for several years without feeling the need to replace it immediately.
That makes a lot of sense, especially with the environmental impact of constantly upgrading our gadgets.
Right? By extending the lifespan of our devices, we can reduce electronic waste and make more sustainable choices. It's about finding that balance between staying up to date and consuming technology responsibly.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into this iPad deal, what's the final thought you want to leave our listeners with? What should they take away from this conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Don't be afraid to question the hype. Think critically about what you need from technology, and don't be afraid to consider older models if they meet your requirements. Value can be found in unexpected places, and sometimes the best deals are the ones that make us pause and reflect on our relationship with technology as a whole.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, listeners, the best tech purchase is the one that truly serves your needs, not just the latest marketing trends. Until next time.